Welcome back to I don't know what we're on, week 4, week 3 of our Tula Pink getting ready for the 100 Quilt Block Challenge. My name is Rachel with the Electric Bee, and I'm hosting this quilt along in 2025. I've decided to make this series of videos to get us ready for the quilt blocks that we're going to make next year. Today, we're all going to talk about cutting. We've picked our fabric, and now we have to do the scary thing, which is slice into it. Today, you're going to need your rotary mat or your cutting mat, your rotary cutter, and your ruler. You're also going to need that fabric. I recommend doing some practice blocks or some practice cutting just so you can kind of get the hang of it. What I would recommend is cutting off some 2.5-inch squares and making some 4 patches. They can be really fun, just sew them together, or just as practice so that you know what you're doing. So grab your fabric, grab your tools, and let's learn how to cut. Okay. Let's go over the basics of fabric and the basics of cutting. So this is obviously my piece of fabric. I have it on top of a cutting board, and I have this piece ironed. It is important that your piece is flat and ironed and there aren't any wrinkles in it, because that will make sure that your piece is not the size that you want it to be. Now, when you cut for a quilt, at least how I cut for a quilt, I don't actually use the lines that are on my mat. I use the lines that are on my ruler. So there are a couple different kinds of rulers that we can use. I am going to show you first on how to use just your basic ruler, and then I'll talk about a square ruler. So on your ruler, as you can see now, I'm right-handed. So everything that I'm going to be talking about is for a right-handed person. But on a normal ruler, you would think the numbers would go from left to right. However, with this one, the numbers go from right to left. That is important because you will be having the fabric underneath these and cutting as you go. Same thing, you're starting at the bottom and you're going up, which might be counterintuitive to what you would think. This is a Creative Grids ruler. What's really nice about it is that it has both the whole number measurements as well as the half measurements. It has these grippies so that it doesn't slide around, and it's very easy to read. It has both white and black markings. On the fabric that I'm demonstrating with, it is a lighter fabric, so the black shows up really well, but sometimes you have dark fabric, and then these lighter lines are really important. All right, let's talk a little just about Fabric 101. The first thing is that fabric, the edges of the fabric is called the selvage. So this is the selvage on this piece of fabric. And the selvage is slightly different weave than the rest of the fabric. It's usually much tighter. And that's because it's on the ends and that's what's being attached on the machine. So this tends to be a much tighter weave. I don't want this in my piecing. Some people piece with selvages. I've made selvage projects specifically, but in this particular quilt, I am not wanting my selvages. From selvage to selvage is known as width of fabric. So this piece obviously has been cut, but that would be the width of fabric. And then this distance would be the length of the fabric. So looking at my pattern, I am going to need to cut some squares out of this. So I have my rotary cutter. I have a fresh blade in it. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a straight edge. This will be the edge that I use from cutting. So everything I will be cutting this side of the fabric, but I first want a straight edge. So what I'm going to do, sorry, this is kind of an awkward angle, but I'm going to put this on the side. Now, this particular fabric is very geometric. So if I want it to kind of be straight, I can line up the edge of my ruler with some of these hexagons. So I think that's what I'm going to kind of do. It doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, again, this is fabric, right? So, everything moves. But then you're just going to put your blade right up against the side of the fabric and go forward. Make sure you are applying pressure to your ruler such that it doesn't shift. Again, this has some grippy, so it doesn't move too much. And then there you go. So this, trash. Thank you, assistant. All right. Now I am going to flip my fabric around because I am right-handed. I'm going to kind of scooch this over, so I hope you're able to see. Okay, so for what I'm doing, I need 2.5-inch squares. So I am going to line the edge of my fabric up with the 2.5 inch mark. So that's right there. So I'm going to line the edge of my fabric up with that 2.5 inch mark. Okay. Since I cut that straight line, I know that it's straight. So I can line it up. Apologize if my head is in here a little bit. And cut. And there we go. So now I have a strip that's 2.5 inches wide. I don't think I can get, let's see, I'm going to need 4 of them. So I'm going to need 2 strips. So again, just lining that up with my 2.5 inches. That 2.5 inch line. And then cut. Okay? Alrighty. So now I have 2 strips that are 2.5 inches. So now we're just going to kind of repeat that process. So I need 2.5 inch squares. So I'm going to turn it. I'm going to cut myself. Make sure that you're lined up on just any line, and then make sure you're on both lines so that this is square. But again, I like to cut that off. Assistant. Thank you. All right, now here's the fun part. So I'm going to do 2 squares out of this and then 2 squares out of that. So instead of lining up with the 2.5 inch, I'm going to line up with the 5 inch because 2.5 plus 2.5 is 5. So I'm going to line this up with the 5 inch line. And again, I'm making sure it's square the whole time. So not only is it lined up with my 5 inch line, but it's also lined up on this line and down here. So it is square through the whole process. I'm going to save this little scrap. I might use it later. And then I'm just going to move my ruler down. Just slide it on down. Now I'm going to do the 2.5, which is right there. And cut. So now I have 2 2.5 inch squares. Okay? All right. Let's do the same thing on this one.
This one has purple.
Yep, this one has purple, doesn't it, Viv?
Yeah.
All right.
Assistant.
My assistant. My beautiful assistant. Here you go. All right. I cut my straight edge.
Boss.
Turn it around. So I'm going to line up with the 5 inch, cut. I'm going to save this. And then line it up with the 2.5 inch. And cut. And there we go. So now I have all 4 of my squares. Cut, yep. And I can put them on my design board. So again, for my example, I happen to be making block number 2. So these would go in the corners. Like that. And actually, we can do the cool ombre. So turn these around. All right. Let's work on some more. Again, it's the same basic principles. We're just going to repeat it with different fabrics. So we're done with this one. So let's get it out of our workspace.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're going to do this one. Now this one is going to be one of our smaller pieces. So we are going to cut it. Ooh, these are going to be some smaller pieces. So I am going to need, how long is this? So what I like to do is I like to look at my pattern, see what I need, and then see kind of what I have and how I want to cut it. Now for this, these are going to be little tiny 1 inch strips. So I'm trying to decide if I want to do it cut it this way or cut it across. With these polka dots, it's going to make a big difference. So I need 10 inches worth. How long is this? So this is not quite 10 inches. So if I were to do this type of strip, I would need 2 of them. So 1 inch. I'm trying to decide I think I'm going to cut them this way. And then, yes, I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to need 4 inches by 2.5. Okay, so just like we've been doing, the first thing we are going to do is what? That's right. We are going to cut ourselves a straight line. Again, I'm not going to worry too much about this because this is our very first line, but we're going to cut a straight line. So get that out of the way. And then I'm going to cut lining up at the 4. Oop. Like that. Get rid of that. Okay. Now I'm going to line this up. And again, I need it to be at least 2.5 inches. So I'm going to cut. Again, I'm always making sure things are square. I'm kind of doing this in a fiddly way, but this ensures that all my pieces are going to be nice. So it's going to be 2.5. So again, I'm just lining it up with my 2.5 and cut. All right. And then, okay, so this is 4 inches wide. Each piece needs to be 1 inch. So then just slide it over to the 2. And then slide it over to the 1. All right. Again, take our pieces. We'll put them on the board. So these go here. Like that. All right, I'm gonna cut the rest of the pieces in a time lapse, just so you can see kind of how it goes, but we'll cut up the whole rest of this block. I'm going to cut these bunnies off because I don't want the bunnies in my piece. So I'm just going to, sorry bunny butts. But sometimes I do that to get the part of the fabric that I want. So that's more commonly known as fussy cutting. So see, I'm only wanting the pink and red parts of the fabric. Not, sorry little bunnies, but not the parts with the bunnies. So I'm strategically kind of cutting them out. Bye, Bun Bun. But I always save them because you just never know when you're going to need a nice little bunny. All right, let's see if I do. Oh, this one will work just fine. These little parts of the bunny are going to be in my seam allowance, so that'll work out. All right, here we go. All done. So I like to use these design boards to kind of lay it out. So as you can see, there we go. I think this is going to look super cute. So that's kind of just cutting basics with strips and cutting into pieces. All right, so for this cutting example, I want to talk about using square rulers. Square rulers are just, I mean, basically the same, but a little bit different in the sense that the numbers going up and down are now top to bottom instead of bottom to top. But again, you're always going right to left. The other thing I really like is that there, especially on this one, there's a diagonal line so you can see where the middle is. So this makes it great for cutting squares or for fussy cutting. So I'm using this fabric on the corners. And so I want to see if maybe, you know, this is a really good thing of like looking at what it looks like. So again, this is going to be a 2.5 inch square. You know, maybe I want to, you know, have this particular flower, you know, be in the middle. So what I like to do is I like to find, so mine is going to be a 2.5 inch square. So here's the 2.5 inch line. Here's the 2.5 inch line. Then there's the middle. I can line my flower up with the middle, as you can see. Now this does waste a bit of fabric, but I think the end result is worth it. So I'm going to take this and we're going to cut that off. Now I just like to spin this around, kind of like knock that out of the way. And then there we go. Now I have a square with my flower where I want it. So I'll just continue cutting kind of with the square ruler, so you can kind of see again. Let's say I want, you know, this flower. Let's see if I have enough room on the sides. Okay, let's see. So 2.5, 2.5. Let's see. 1.5, so that'd be 1.25. Okay, so there's our middle. All right, so 2.5, 2.5. So I'm putting that flower in the middle. All right, swivel it around. And this is nice because you can cut now 2 sides at the same time instead of just one. So there we go. And then, you know, let's do the other 2. Why not? We're here, right? So let's see. Now I want, we'll just keep going down this line. Okay, what if I want this one? But the cutting basics still apply. You want to make sure that you are applying pressure to your ruler and that you are cutting. Cute. All right, let's do one more. Let's see. This guy's cute. Ooh. Now see, that one I accidentally slid, so what I'm going to do is I know this is longer than I need to. I'm just going to whack that off. So I know that that side is straight. This happens, right? Happens to all of us. And I'm just going to kind of realign what I was doing. All right. What were we doing here? Okay. There we go. So that's kind of how to use square rulers. Cute, right? But you can use, you know, a multitude. You can use the straight rulers, square rulers, you know, whatever floats your boat. So I'm going to continue. So that's basically cutting 101. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And there we have it. That's how I do cutting. Once you kind of get the hang of it, it's really not all that hard. I think one of the trickiest things with cutting is just making sure you have everything lined up. My recommendation is to go slow and to really look at those lines and make sure that you have the correct line lined up with your rotary cutter, and you're going to do just fine. You know, always remember that fabric is flexible and it tends to move. And, you know, make sure you're applying pressure and your quilt blocks are going to look wonderful. So next week, I think we're going to talk specifically about fussy cutting. I'm going to really get into some of my fun fabrics, and we're really going to talk about how I really think about fussy cutting and what the kind of end result is going to look like. So I hope you tune in then. Otherwise, I really hope that you'll join us in 2025 as we sew these quilt blocks together, and I will see you then. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the new year. Bye. Hi, Kumasi. This is my cat, Kumasi. Hi, Pooh.